Easter, it is also the oldest feast of the Christian Church, as old as Christianity, the connecting link between the Old and New Testaments. Easter is the principal feast of the ecclesiastical year. Leo I, Sermo 47 in Exodum, calls it the greatest feast, festum festorum, and says that Christmas is celebrated only in preparation for Easter. The date of Easter and the dependent feasts was of old considered so important that Durandus writ. Div off 8 ci declares a priest unworthy of the name who does not know the computus paschalis. Relates to Esther, a Teutonic goddess of the rising light of day and spring, which deity, however, is otherwise unknown, even in the Edda. The English term, according to the Venerable Bede, de temporum ration, IV, relates to Esther, a Teutonic goddess of the rising light of day and spring, which deity, however, is otherwise unknown, even in the Edda, Simrock, Mythal, 362, Anglo-Saxon, Easter, Eastern, Old High German, Ostra, Ostrara, Ostern, German, Ostern. April was called Eastermonad. The plural Eastern is used because the feast lasts 7 days. Like the French plural Pax, it is a translation from the Latin Festa Paschalia, the entire octave of Easter. The Greek term for Easter, Pascha, has nothing in common with the verb paschine, to suffer, although by the later symbolic writers it was connected with it. It is the Aramaic form of the Hebrew Pesach, Transitus, Passover. The Greeks called Easter the Pascha Anastasimon, Good Friday the Pascha Staurosimon. The respective terms used by the Latins are Pascha Resurrectionis and Pascha Crucifixionis. In the Roman and monastic breviaries the feast bears the title Dominica Resurrectionis, in the Mozarabic breviary, in Latation Dii Pascha Resurrectionis, in the Ambrosian breviary, in Die Sancto Paschi. The Romance languages have adopted the Hebrew-Greek term, Latin, Pascha, Italian, Pasqua, Spanish, Pascua, French, Pax. Also some Celtic and Teutonic nations use it, Scottish, Pasch, Dutch, Passion, in New Dutch spelling, Passen Danish, Påsk, Swedish, Pask, even in the German provinces of the Lower Rhine the people call the feast Paschen not Ostern. The word is, principally in Spain and Italy, identified with the word solemnity, and extended to other feasts, e.g. SP Pascua Florida Palm Sunday, Pascua de Pentecostés Pentecost, Pascua de la Natividad, Christmas, Pascua de Epifanía, Epiphany. In some parts of France also First Communion is called Pax, whatever time of the year administered. The feast. Easter is the principal feast of the ecclesiastical year. Leo I, Sermo 47 in Exodum, calls it the greatest feast, festum festorum, and says that Christmas is celebrated only in preparation for Easter. It is the center of the greater part of the ecclesiastical year. The order of Sundays from Septuagesima to the last Sunday after Pentecost, the Feast of the Ascension, Pentecost, Corpus Christi, and all other movable feasts, from that of the prayer of Jesus in the Garden, Tuesday after Septuagesima, to the Feast of the Sacred Heart, Friday after the octave of Corpus Christi, depend upon the Easter date. Commemorating the slaying of the true Lamb of God and the resurrection of Christ, the cornerstone upon which faith is built, it is also the oldest feast of the Christian Church, as old as Christianity, the connecting link between the Old and New Testaments. That the Apostolic Fathers do not mention it, and that we first hear of it principally through the controversy of the Quartodecimans are purely accidental. The connection between the Jewish Passover and the Christian feast of Easter is real and ideal. Real, since Christ died on the first Jewish Easter day; ideal, like the relation between type and reality, because Christ's death and resurrection had its figures and types in the Old Law, particularly in the Paschal Lamb, which was eaten towards evening of the 14th of Nisan. This is a concept that is important, and if you make it to the end you will learn who this angel is. In fact, the Jewish feast was taken over into the Christian Easter celebration. The liturgy, exultet, sings of the passing of Israel through the Red Sea, the Paschal Lamb, the column of fire, etc. Apart, however, from the Jewish feast, the Christians would have celebrated the anniversary of the death and the resurrection of Christ. But for such a feast it was necessary to know the exact calendar date of Christ's death. To know this day was very simple for the Jews. It was the day after the 14th of the first month, the 15th of Nisan of their calendar. But in other countries of the vast Roman Empire there were other systems of chronology. The Romans from 45 BC had used the reformed Julian calendar. There were also the Egyptian and the Syro-Macedonian calendar. The foundation of the Jewish calendar was the lunar year of 354 days, whilst the other systems depended on the solar year. In consequence, the first days of the Jewish months and years did not coincide with any fixed days of the Roman solar year. Every fourth year of the Jewish system had an intercalary month. Since this month was inserted, not according to some scientific method or some definite rule, but arbitrarily, by command of the Sanhedrin, a distant Jewish date can never with certainty be transposed into the corresponding Julian or Gregorian date, idella chronology, I 570 square. The connection between the Jewish and the Christian Pasch explains the movable character of this feast. Easter has no fixed date, like Christmas, because the 15th of Nisan of the Semitic calendar was shifting from date to date on the Julian calendar. Since Christ, the true Paschal Lamb, had been slain on the very day when the Jews, in celebration of their Passover, immolated the figurative lamb, the Jewish Christians in the Orient followed the Jewish method and commemorated the death of Christ on the 15th of Nisan, and his resurrection on the 17th of Nisan, no matter on what day of the week they fell. For this observance they claimed the authority of St. John and St. Philip. In the rest of the empire another consideration predominated. Every Sunday of the year was a commemoration of the resurrection of Christ, which had occurred on a Sunday. Because the Sunday after 14 Nisan was the historical day of the resurrection, at Rome this Sunday became the Christian feast of Easter. Easter was celebrated in Rome and Alexandria on the first Sunday, after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, and the Roman Church claimed for this observance the authority of Sts Peter and Paul. The spring equinox in Rome fell on March 25, in Alexandria on March 21. At Antioch Easter was kept on the Sunday after the Jewish Passover. See Easter controversy. In Gaul a number of bishops, wishing to escape the difficulties of the Paschal computation, seem to have assigned Easter to a fixed date of the Roman calendar, celebrating the death of Christ on March 25, his resurrection on March 27, Marinus Domiensis in PL, LXXII, 47-51. Since already in the 3rd century March 25 was considered the day of the crucifixion computus. Pseudo-Cyprianus, edition.
Lersch, Chronologie, 261.
This practice was of short duration. Many calendars in the Middle Ages contain these same dates, March 25, 27 March, for purely historical, not liturgical, reasons. Grotefend, Zeitrechnung, 2, 46, 60, 72, 106, 110, etc. The Montanists in Asia Minor kept Easter on the Sunday after April 6, Schmid, Osterfestberechnung in der Abendländischen Kirche. The First Council of Nicaea, 325. Go home team, and you failed to kill us all with the purge. Decreed that the Roman practice should be observed throughout the Church. But even at Rome the Easter term was changed repeatedly. Those who continued to keep Easter with the Jews were called quartodecimans, 14 Nisan, and were excluded from the Church. The computus paschalis, the method of determining the date of Easter and the dependent feasts, was of old considered so important that Durandus writ. Div off 8 ci declares a priest unworthy of the name who does not know the computus paschalis. The movable character of Easter, March 22 to April 25, gives rise to inconveniences, especially in modern times. For decades scientists and other people have worked in vain for a simplification of the computus, assigning Easter to the first Sunday in April or to the Sunday nearest the 7th of April. Some even wish to put every Sunday to a certain date of the month, e.g. beginning with New Year's always on a Sunday, etc. cl.
Günther, Zeitschrift Weltall, 1903, Sandtage Erd P. Dueren in Pastor Bonus, Trier, 1906 c.
Tondini, L'Italia e la questione del calendario, Florence, 1905. Punto.
Explanation of the Egyptian and the Syro-Macedonian calendar. In this passage, the author addresses the historical complexities involved in determining the date of Easter. The central issue lies in the use of different calendar systems throughout the Roman Empire, none of which corresponded directly with the Jewish calendar. The text references 3 non-Jewish calendars. Roman, Julian, calendar. Egyptian calendar. Syro-Macedonian calendar.
1.
The Egyptian calendar. The Egyptian calendar functioned as a solar calendar, comprising 12 months of 30 days each, with 5 additional days at the end of the year. Due to its strictly solar nature, it did not align with the Jewish lunar months. This discrepancy meant that early Christians in Egypt faced challenges in translating the Jewish lunar date for Christ's death, 14 to 15 Nisan, into their own solar calendar.
2.
The Syro-Macedonian calendar. This calendar was prevalent in Syria and various regions of the eastern Mediterranean, originating from the Hellenistic Macedonian system introduced by Alexander the Great. It also adopted a solar structure, although it featured different month names and New Year dates compared to other systems. Christians in these areas encountered similar issues converting Jewish lunar dates to local solar equivalents.
3.
Significance of these calendars in context. The Jewish calendar, based on a 354-day lunar year, frequently drifted relative to the solar-based calendars used elsewhere in the empire. The Jewish authorities occasionally inserted an intercalary month, but without a consistent rule. Consequently, ancient Jewish dates cannot be reliably corresponded to Roman, Egyptian, or Syro-Macedonian dates. This calendrical inconsistency contributed to Easter becoming a movable feast. Although Christ's crucifixion is commemorated on 14 to 15 Nisan, the equivalent date shifts when converted to solar calendars. Summary. By highlighting the Egyptian and the Syro-Macedonian calendar, the article emphasizes that Christians across different parts of the empire utilized distinct solar calendars, none of which were synchronized with the Jewish lunar calendar. This misalignment complicated efforts to establish the precise anniversary of Christ's death and resurrection, thus explaining why Easter does not fall on a fixed date. Additionally, the text alludes to broader themes concerning the origins and historical treatment of religious observances, referencing passages such as Joshua 24 verses 14 to 15, NKJV, to underscore the importance of tradition and consistency in worship practices. It also highlights what they leave out and deny to their followers in the process. You end up worshipping one Elohim, or assigning to their tribe. That's fine with me as I follow you, Bovide varies, but I spelt it that way so you say it correctly. It would seem the one over all wants all to be included, so the forgotten others will be in focus as well as those associated tribes. Tribes can jump ship at any time, but like Egypt follow the wrong one and it's going to suck. On the other hand, the inclusion would state no road is wrong, which seems pretty neat as well. The fact is, the church and the world is separating and disconnecting what you feel and know to be true. Joshua 24 verses 14 to 15, NKJV. Greater than 14, now therefore, fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. Greater than 15, and if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I'm not deep diving here, that's not the whole point of this. Just doing my job. It's called the allotted lands deals, where the tribes have their land freedom and top-down leadership. I could explain, but... Definition. Liturgy, liturgia, is a Greek composite word meaning originally a public duty, a service to the state undertaken by a citizen. Its elements are litos, from leos equals laos, people, meaning public, and ergo, obsolete in the present stem, used in future erxo, etc., to do. From this we have liturgos, a man who performs a public duty, a public servant, often used as equivalent to the Roman lictor, then liturgo, to do such a duty, liturgima, its performance, and liturgia, the public duty itself. At Athens, the liturgia was the public service performed by the wealthier citizens at their own expense, such as the office of gymnasiarch, who superintended the gymnasium, that of chorus, who paid the singers of a chorus in the theater, that of the hestiator, who gave a banquet to his tribe, of the triarchus, who provided a worship for the state. The meaning of the word liturgy is then extended to cover any general service of a public kind. In the Septuagint it, and the verb liturgo, is used for the public service of the temple, e.g., Exodus 38 verse 27, 39:12, etc. Thence it comes to have a religious sense as the function of the priests, the ritual service of the temple, e.g., Joel 1 verse 9, 2:17, etc. In the New Testament this religious meaning has become definitely established. In Luke 1 verse 23, Zachary goes home when the days of his liturgy, ai hemerites liturges autu, are over. In Hebrews 8 verse 6, the high priest of the new law has obtained a better liturgy, that is a better kind of public religious service than that of the temple. So in Christian use liturgy meant the public official service of the church, that corresponded to the official service of the temple in the Old Law. Vespers, then, was the most solemn office of the day, and was composed of the psalms called lucernales. Psalm 140 is called Psalmus lucernalis by the Apostolic Constitutions, 8:35, cf. 2, Lix, also Cabral, L.C. The Peregrinatio does not mention the number of psalms sung at this hour, but Cassian, who, a short time after the Peregrinatio, describes this office as it was celebrated by the monks of Egypt, says they recited 12 psalms as at vigils matins. Then 2 lessons were read as at vigils, one from the Old and the other from the New Testament. Each psalm was followed by a short prayer, PL 49, 83-4, 88-9. For the rest Cassian agrees with the Peregrinatio. He says the office was recited towards 5 or 6 o'clock, and that all the lights were lighted. This evening synaxis is looked upon as a souvenir of the evening sacrifice of the Old Law. The use of incense, candles, and other lights would seem to suggest the Jewish rites which accompanied the evening sacrifice, Exodus 29 verse 39, Numbers 28:4, Psalm 140 verse 2. Daniel 9 verse 21, 1 Chronicles 23 verse 30, cf. Heinberg, Die Religion.
Allotted. Der Bibel, Munich, 1869, p.
362.
It may thus be seen that the lucernarium was, together with vigils, the most important part of the offices of the day, being composed of almost the same elements as the latter, at least in certain regions. Its existence in the 4th century is also confirmed by St. Augustine, St. Ambrose, St. Basil, St. Ephraim, and a little later, by several councils in Gaul and Spain, and by the various monastic rules. See texts in Bommerbyron, L. C. 78, 80, 118-27, 188-98, 208, etc. The Apostolic Constitutions 8, 21, 34, 35 describe it in almost the same terms as the Peregrinatio. Before the 4th century we find allusions to the evening prayer in the earlier fathers, Clement I of Rome, Clemens Romanus, St. Ignatius, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, Origen, the canons of St. Hippolytus, St. Cyprian. For text see Bommerbyron, L. C. I. 20 SQQ, 73-4, 76, 78. Pliny, in his famous letter at the beginning of the 2nd century, speaks of liturgical reunions of the Christians in the morning and in the evening, coitus antilicani et vespertini, EP, X. 97. Vespers is, therefore, together with vigils, the most ancient office known in the Church. What computus paschalis means in this context. On the page, the phrase computus paschalis refers to the method used by the Church to calculate the date of Easter and all the feasts that depend on it. Because Easter is not fixed to a single calendar date, unlike Christmas, the Church needed a reliable system to determine when the spring equinox occurs, when the first full moon after the equinox falls, which Sunday follows that full moon. This entire mathematical, astronomical, liturgical process is what the article calls the computus paschalis. Compass why it mattered so much. The article emphasizes that the computus was considered essential knowledge for clergy. Durandus declares a priest unworthy of the name who does not know the computus paschalis. Why such intensity? Because Easter is the central feast of the Christian year. Many other feasts, Ascension, Pentecost, Corpus Christi, etc., depend on its date. Early Christians disagreed on how to calculate it, quartodecimans versus Roman practice. Different calendars, Jewish lunar, Julian solar, Egyptian, Syro-Macedonian, made the calculation complicated. So the computus was not just a date-finding trick, it was a foundational part of organizing the entire liturgical year. Crescent moon, what the computus actually calculated. From the surrounding text, the computus had to reconcile the Jewish lunar calendar, where 14 to 15 Nisan marks Passover. The Roman solar calendar. The rule that Easter must fall on the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox. This is why Easter can fall anywhere between March 22nd and April 25th. Wrench why the computus was difficult. The article explains several complications. The Jewish calendar inserted leap months irregularly, by decision of the Sanhedrin. Lunar months do not align with solar months. Different regions used different equinox dates: Rome, March 25th, Alexandria, March 21st. Some groups tried to fix Easter to a specific Roman date to avoid the complexity. All of this made the computus a serious scholarly task. Feast of the Ascension. New Advent. See also the fact of the Ascension. I took the translations from there. The 40th day after Easter Sunday, commemorating the ascension of Christ into heaven, according to Mark 16 verse 19, Luke 24 verse 51, and Acts 1 verse 2. In the Eastern Church this feast was known as analepsis, the taking up, and also as the episosomene, the salvation, denoting that by ascending into his glory, Christ completed the work of our redemption. The terms used in the West, ascensio and occasionally, ascensa, signify that Christ was raised up by his own powers. Tradition designates Mount Olivet near Bethany as the place where Christ left the earth. The feast falls on Thursday. It is one of the ecumenical feasts, ranking with the feasts of the Passion, of Easter, and of Pentecost among the most solemn in the calendar. Has a vigil and, since the 15th century, an octave which is set apart for a novena of preparation for Pentecost, in accordance with the directions of Leo XIII. History. The observance of this feast is of great antiquity. Although no documentary evidence of it exists prior to the beginning of the 5th century, St. Augustine says that it is of apostolic origin, and he speaks of it in a way that shows it was the universal observance of the Church long before his time. Frequent mention of it is made in the writings of St. John Chrysostom, St. Gregory of Nyssa, and in the Constitution of the Apostles. The pilgrimage of Sylvia, Peregrinatio Etherii, speaks of the vigil of this feast, and of the feast itself, as they were kept in the church built over the grotto in Bethlehem in which Christ was born. Duchesne, Christian Worship, 491 to 515. It may be that prior to the 5th century the fact narrated in the Gospels was commemorated in conjunction with the feast of Easter or Pentecost. Some believe that the much disputed 43rd decree of the Council of Elvira, c. 300, condemning the practice of observing a feast on the 40th day after Easter and neglecting to keep Pentecost on the 50th day, implies that the proper usage of the time was to commemorate the Ascension along with Pentecost. Representations of the mystery are found in diptychs and frescoes dating as early as the 5th century. Customs. Certain customs were connected with the liturgy of this feast, such as the blessing of beans and grapes after the commemoration of the dead in the canon of the Mass, the blessing of first fruits afterwards done on rogation days, the blessing of a candle, the wearing of mitres by deacon and subdeacon, the extinction of the Paschal candle, and triumphal processions with torches and banners outside the churches to commemorate the entry of Christ into heaven. Rock records the English custom of carrying at the head of the procession the banner bearing the device of the lion, and at the foot the banner of the dragon, to symbolize the triumph of Christ in his ascension over the evil one. In some churches the scene of the ascension was vividly reproduced by elevating the figure of Christ above the altar through an opening in the roof of the church. In others, whilst the figure of Christ was made to ascend, that of the devil was made to descend. In the liturgies generally the day is meant to celebrate the completion of the work of our salvation, the pledge of our glorification with Christ, and his entry into heaven with our human nature glorified. Sources. Duchesne, Christian Worship, Note on Vespers, aka middleman or original top-down leadership. In Cologne and Trier the solemn vespers of Easter were abolished in the 19th century, Nordamerikanisches Pastoralblatt, April, 1908 p.
50.
Haus Side note for those who see. Your therianthrope is the marking or sign on the banner of the tribes. Yours will likely be that animal or sign. House blessings. On the eve of Easter the homes are blessed, writ. Rom tit. 8c. 4 In memory of the passing of the angel in Egypt and the signing of the doorposts with the blood of the paschal lamb. The parish priest visits the houses of his parish. The papal apartments are also blessed on this day. The room, however, in which the Pope is found by the visiting cardinal is blessed by the pontiff himself, Moroni, Dizzy. House blessings. On the eve of Easter the homes are blessed, writ. Rom tit. 8c. 4 In memory of the passing of the angel in Egypt and the signing of the doorposts with the blood of the paschal lamb. The parish priest visits the houses of his parish. The papal apartments are also blessed on this day. The room. You know what's crazy here? That's exactly how I found the Tau and Tau. Her that being. When they came it was the same as over the houses in Egypt. The same beings mentioned in Ingo Swan's book, and in many creation stories. I have found and shown the classification of being that of being seraphim. I did that without the help human interventions. I can't say I didn't have the help of the others however. This messenger is meant to renew the covenant with the tribes. The Church has listed the Gentiles as a group that is not the case, it is a family, and am not saying that because of my own reasons, but rather what I have always felt and later shown. I have pushed almost every boundary to find if it matters, it seems choice matter and actions but based on intent. It's all nature. The other may not be able to be classified specifically with the current elements we're using and language. In fact the Tau and Tau lead you to the fact of being silent. Then I later came across a message from my Nana from beyond I resonated with deeply, and here it is, and I can only assume you would understand why.
Giacomo Leopardi, 1818-1821. Sempre caro mi fu quest'ermo colle, e questa siepe, che da tanta parte dell'ultimo orizzonte il guardo esclude. Ma sedendo e rimirando, interminati spazi di là da quella, e sovrumani sienzi, e profondissima quiete lo nel pensier mi fingo, ove per poco il cor non si spaura. E come il vento odo stormir tra queste piante, io quello infinito silenzio a questa voce vo comparando, e mi sobbien l'eterno, e le morte stagioni, e la presente e viva, e il suon di lei. Così tra questa immensità s'annega il pensier mio.
English. Giacomo Leopardi, 1818-1821. This hermit hill was always dear to me, and this hedge, which from so much of the last horizon the gaze excludes. But sitting and gazing, infinite spaces beyond it, and superhuman beings, and profound stillness in my thoughts, I pretend to be there, where my heart is scarcely frightened. And as the wind I hear rustling among these plants, I compare that infinite silence to this voice, and the eternal relieves me, and the dead seasons, and the present is alive, and the sound of her Thus my thought is drowned in this immensity. Note: the legend was named Phaon, in Greek Phia Meganu, from Phi, light, but her life was made of shadow, she loved nature and beauty. Blessing of food. In both the Oriental and Latin churches, it is customary to have those victuals which were prohibited during Lent blessed by the priests before eating them on Easter Day, especially meat, eggs, butter, and cheese. Ritual Bucher, Paderborn, 1904, Maximilianus, Liturg. Or, 117. Those who ate before the food was blessed, according to popular belief, were punished by God, sometimes instantaneously. Migny, Liturgy, SV.
Pack.
Note: I ate lamb only cooked burnt with oil and some asparagus and rice. To find the connection in the twilight being the strong hours, we can look to Judaism, and how the new day begins at sundown. We're being led the same places. You're missing something. Besides a teammate. Lastly, a characteristic feature of the Messianic kingdom, as predicted, is its universal extent. Not merely the 12 tribes, but the Gentiles are to yield allegiance to the Son of David. A characteristic feature of the Messianic kingdom, as predicted, is its universal extent. Not merely the 12 tribes, but the Gentiles are to yield allegiance to the Son of David. All kings are to serve and obey him. His dominion is to extend to the ends of the earth. Psalm 21 verse 28 square, 2:7-12, 116:1, Zechariah 9 verse 10. I know more, but I jump all over. I have to put a lot of pieces into a chronological and compared order to extract the underlining meaning, in which I have mainly already done. And you hear the world claiming they know, or they're the ones. Proverbs 4-8. John 3:12. Jesuha 24:14-15. Psalm 82. Genesis. Enoch. The man who fights with God. Exodus and the signs. The Tau and Tau equals X, later translated to mean the cross.